It is now 5:30, so we will begin the pre-meeting. Roll call, please.
Mayor Heath,
Present.
Commissioner House,
Present.
Commissioner Roberts,
Present.
Commissioner Miller,
Present.
Commissioner Strayer,
Present.
Commissioner Castleberry, Commissioner Gauss,
Present.
all commission members present.
At this time, I will turn it over to our city administrator, Greg Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. So the first item and only scheduled item on tonight's agenda is what we're calling community revitalization efforts. Previously, the Blight Committee that has been working on strategies for addressing that, and particularly residential blight over quite a substantial period of time now, probably going back over a year. And they wanted to come tonight and give you an update on the outcome of their thinking to date and strategies going forward. And I'll leave it up to you, commissioners, whether you want to do it in here. I think we can do it in here. I think Michelle will be able to hear the presenters as they want to go through their slide deck. If we want to do that, or if you would rather move out into the big room because there's more screens out there, that would be fine too. Leave it to your discussion. But with that, I will turn it over to Mark Murray, Lynn Punnett, and Scott Westfall, who I think are here to present.
Thanks, Greg. Thank you all for giving us some of your very valuable time. My name's Mark Murray, and actually, Lynn, I had hoped to be able to bring this to a conclusion, but Lynn asked me to go in front and give a brief opening statement. I am the geezer in the room, and she was concerned I'd fall asleep before the end of the presentation, so I got into the front. Actually, Scott was going to do that too. So Mark Murray, I'm a longtime Adrian resident. In 1975, I bought my first home in Adrian, 209 Sarah Street. It was a HUD house that was condemned, and I fixed it up and moved in, lived there for a number of years. In 78, I bought my second home in Adrian at 922 Elm Street. It was a HUD house, and I fixed it up, lived there for quite a while. After that, I purchased 3 or 4 other homes on the east side and rented them out. Many of you know that I'm a 45, 50-year business owner in Adrian, and for the last 20 years, I've lived on the north side of town. For almost 5 decades, I've witnessed our community struggle as growth has happened outside of the city of Adrian, as we've moved from 90% home ownership to around 50%. With the median age of homes in the Adrian area now probably close to 100 years old. Unfortunately, myself and others in my generation have not met the challenge of our aging real estate infrastructure. To all of you, I apologize for that. We should have worked harder on this issue long ago, like cities like Wyandotte and other places. Unfortunately, those of us who should have been doing that, we didn't get on it fast enough. So we're placing this at your feet here to take care of the problem. So here we are with a plan that we've derived from 1 year of investigation with 3 of the top national award recipients in revitalization. We hope that our city leaders will take this effort with the spirit that it's offered, humbly and with the hope for our future as a community. Finally, we wish to thank the city leadership for all the progress that our community has made in the past few years. And especially we'd like to thank Mayor Angie, Commissioners Ladd and Allen, City Manager Greg, D'Angelo Boone, Lynn Punnett, Robert Love, Scott Westfall, and the many others who've been involved in this year-long effort to discover ways that we could move our community ahead in revitalization. So thank you all. Lynn?
Frank, I'm going to sit by you so I can see the screen. And Michelle, if you would bring up the presentation, I would appreciate it.
Give me just a second here.
Sure. Apologies, Gordon, can't see your face, but
I'll move.
So I can see your face. Well, while that's coming up, I guess I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the reason that I'm involved and why I choose to be here tonight and why I care about blight. And D'Angelo Boone should be coming as well, and he will, I hope, tell you his personal reasons for being involved. But about 7 years ago, I got involved in identifying 5 blocks in historic East Adrian where we would focus on revitalization. And my motivation then and still today is to bring resources to people who need help. People who have resources and can keep up their homes and they have money, they should do it, okay? But there are a lot of people who don't. And so that was what was a motivation for me really early on. And to bring resources and education knowledge to people. There are a lot of resources available for low-income people and they don't know about them. So my work was very much from the beginning for that reason, and it continues to be. And so also my understanding of neighborhood revitalization early on. So I'm a construction person, some of you know that, right? And I thought neighborhood revitalization was about repairing homes. And it is. But what I learned over time is that neighborhood revitalization is about people. Because if we want sustainability, and everyone does, we want whatever we're about to do, whatever money we're about to pour into this, if we want it to be sustainable, it really has to come from the people. We can pour millions of dollars into roofs and siding and windows, but if the people who live there don't care about it, then it's just going to decay again. So we've got to build up the people who live in these areas that we're going to tackle so that they have a reason to have pride and believe and be involved and be in this room instead of me, okay? So I think it's about people. So Michelle, if you would advance the slide, excuse me. I always think it's important to know what we're talking about. And so, you know, blight can be a lot of different things, but in the context of what we're addressing, it is to have a severely detrimental effect on something, right? And to spoil or damage something. And in our case, we mean a decayed, rundown, neglected, or dangerous structures that negatively impact those that live around them. That's the blight that we're talking about here. Go ahead, Michelle. So quality of life has a lot of elements to it, including economic development, education, health, safety, transportation, other types of amenities, but I've always taken it as housing. I mean, that's the thing I'm into. So I'm here today because of our housing stock situation. So click on, and that little arrow just tells you why I'm here. And so advance the slide. So you guys have prioritized blight. And as a group, as Administrator Elliott pointed out, we've been meeting for a year, about a year, maybe a little longer. I don't know. It's been quite some time. And different people have been at the table over that time. And many of them have been residents from historic East Adrian. Okay, but as a group, we all decided that we want a goal to have 0 blighted properties in 10 years. That's what we are working toward. We hope you agree. Ultimately, you guys are going to decide here how much is invested, and you could have a loftier goal than that. But this is what we're coming to you with as a recommendation.
And
Right.
I stop you right there.
Yes.
So this whole presentation is only about residential blight, not commercial. Is that correct?
It's what we're focusing on. And there's a slide in here that says that we are focusing on residential here tonight, But commercial and industrial blight is a priority for the city also. The process is the same.
It is. I was just making sure that I'm understanding. When
Yes.
you use the word blight, we're talking about purely residential blight.
Tonight we are, but
Tonight.
that's why I use the word properties though, and not houses. Because it is bigger than residential as a city, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so, but yes, our focus tonight is residential
Okay.
properties.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I meant to delete these lines, but, you know, why do we even want to do this? Okay, great, we have a goal to eliminate blight in 10 years, but why does that matter? Well, we want people to want to move here, live here, work here, shop here, invest here, right? And prosper here. And a city is safer when you don't have blight. Crime is reduced and safety increases when blight is reduced and eliminated. There's certainly economic development and lots of business opportunities that are more likely to come if we aren't known as a blighted city. Property values increase. A really big thing that people don't realize is a healthy residential housing stock is a healthier community. When you don't have mold and you don't have a big sewer in your basement and a lot of really serious issues, your residents are healthier. And I know that ProMedica and their social determinants of health understand that, and they're focused on it too. So it's about health as well. And just all those quality of life elements that I talked about are the reasons that we want to have zero blighted properties. And we want to do it in 10 years. Go ahead, Michelle. So as this group started meeting some time ago now, we had some pretty neat opportunities. We met at the Armory and we had Zoom and in-person sessions with representatives from Mobile, Alabama, St. Petersburg, Florida, and Wyandotte. And a small group of people actually went also and visited Wyandotte. And when we get into that, you can ask questions or anything and we'll answer those. But you know, what was learned is that there are lots of different approaches that we can take and that they took. There's going to have to be houses demolished. It's inevitable and it's going to have to be budgeted, right? There'll have to be new construction and repairs. And there's just lots and lots of benefits that I don't have to tell you about of why you want to increase homeownership instead of the high rental rate that we have. Partnerships are key. Funding opportunities exist that we haven't tapped into as a city. And more unprecedented funding is going to be coming in the future toward housing, and we've got to be ready, right, to tap into that. And tracking it, measuring it, and reporting on it is key. Data is everything. We know that, right? So we need to do that. We recognize that, and it's a really important part of it. Go ahead, Michelle. Okay, so we've got to have your support. If you don't believe in this, it's not going to go anywhere. And you guys have to really recognize the need for the investment. There has got to be strong leadership at the city. Particularly, every other person, these other communities we talked to said a key element is there is a absolute champion in the city, a strong leader that is just really passionate about it and keeps it as a priority. Have to have agreed upon goals. They've got to be measurable. We've got to collect and track that data. The budget has got to be increased significantly. I'm talking millions of dollars that have to be put toward this if we're serious about tackling blight and helping people. You're going to have to put in staff. And you already have by allocating funding and filling or seeking to fill the position of your community revitalization coordinator, who I just say CRC because that's just easier. So if I say CRC, I'm talking about that position. But we may in time find out that more staff is needed. We don't know, but it's a great start that that position was approved and is getting filled. As I already mentioned, partnerships, and we've got to engage the residents. They have to be a part of this in order to have success. Go ahead, Michelle. Code enforcement, man, if we didn't learn anything, we know how important that is. We know because of all the years we didn't have adequate code enforcement and the consequences of that. But we heard from these other communities how important code enforcement is. And it's fantastic that a second code enforcement officer has been hired and is doing a great job on rentals, okay? That's wonderful. But it was suggested that in addition to what you've already done, that perhaps part-time people be added, and maybe they're police officers or retired firemen or retired police officers that know the city and know the properties. And that these part-time people tend to be really efficient. That's the experience of the other communities. We feel really strongly that if a landlord owns a number of properties, one code enforcement officer should not be inspecting all of their properties. Split that up. There's heavy administrative support that's going to be needed, and education and assistance is key to the residents. Those that really need the help need somebody who's going to help them. And we understand the community, the CRC is going to do that. So there were three things that Wyandotte, therefore, we say Wyandotte, we pulled them out, one, because they're in Michigan. They're not a major metropolitan city like St. Pete or Mobile. Their population's not that different from ours. I think theirs is around 25,000 and ours is real close to 21,000 now, the latest stuff I saw. So there are a lot of similarities in Wyandotte. So I'm pulling them out, and we were able to do the site visit. They named three things that were absolutely recommended. The first is a rental inspection program, which we already have here. We learned that other communities, some of them do it once a year. Ours is once every 3 years, I think. Is that right? Some do it every 5 years. But anyway, we have a rental inspection program in place, and so that's good. Upon sale inspection, though, we don't have. And I know that Commissioner Helt, I'm certain, is going to speak to that before this is over tonight. And I'll let him talk about meetings he's had with realtors and others have had as well. But Wyandotte said that was, even if only one thing, upon sale inspection is the most important thing. And the gentleman there who's a realtor for, I believe, 28 years, something like that, a community leader, said literally it saved Wyandotte. Those were his words. And they also recommended a magistrate. And I know that Administrator Elliott will talk about that, I'm sure. I hope he does. At this time, the work that Mr. Galuli is doing and with our courts seems to be working okay. So maybe we don't need a magistrate right now, but maybe we would someday. But these are the three things that Wyandotte said were game changers for their community. Go ahead, Michelle. And so I just talked about some of that. Mr. Galuli says the homeowners are responding and there isn't a backlog in the court right now. Now, a magistrate, I understand, is often used when you really get bogged down in court, and they can be instrumental in keeping stuff out of the court that isn't necessary. But we don't even seem to have that problem yet. And we have a pretty good process in place, as I understand. So Commissioner Roberts, here's where I would have said tonight, we're focusing on residential blight, but commercial and industrial is also a priority for the city. The process is the same. And the DDA Main Street program, it is a priority to focus on downtown as well. Those structures downtown and making sure that they're kept up and that we take advantage of all the opportunities for continued facade improvement and investment in our beautiful historic downtown Adrian. Go ahead, Michelle. So D'Angelo, could I call on you to come and maybe start talking about rentals?
All
I will turn it over to him and just say, to kick him off, that we know we have a rental inspection process in place. Glad about that. And glad that it's being enforced the way it is now, okay? But we do have some unintended consequences, or maybe you knew about it going into it. I don't know. I'm calling them unintended consequences. And that is that rents are rising because people are being forced to repair their rental properties. And we know of rental property owners that are raising their rents because of it. And people are being displaced. If you weren't aware of that, I'm telling you now tonight, people in this city are now being displaced because of the rising rents. And so we got to figure out what to do about that, right? So turn it over.
My name is D'Angelo Boone. I am the Community Outreach Manager for Habitat for Humanity. I'm working primarily in the East Side, in the Parish Park community with Habitat's Neighborhood Revitalization Initiative. And also community advocate, leader with the A3 All About Adrian Resident Coalition. And partner with many other groups and agencies in our community. The reason why I am so interested and passionate about the blight action is because there's an opportunity for us in community. We know that we are all looking to have a place that is more presentable, something that's more attractive for potential residents to come in, potential business owners, students to reside and continue to remain in Adrian after college is done. But these are, and so this impacts all of us, and this impacts our community as a whole. So we're looking to beautify our community. We're looking to increase the value, to make it more attractive to potential individuals that will come here. But while we're doing that, we also have to be intentional as to what this does to our residents and how this impacts our residents. There's this thing called gentrification and displacement due to gentrifying neighborhoods. So my interest is always with the residents that live here, that reside here, that believe in what Adrian can become. And if we all work together, what it will become. But we have to be intentional also that while we are putting these initiatives in, that we are thinking about the ones that this is going to impact the greatest. And that's usually the community that's marginalized, the ones that can't afford to make all these renovations, that can't make all the changes within the time frame that's put. And then we also have to think about what this does to tenants that live in units or apartments that are owned by landlords that are on the list for blight. How does this impact them? And I believe that there's a way that we can approach this and have some incentives in place that's beneficial for the landlord as well as the resident that's living there. Because as landlords are pushed to improve property, which is a benefit for the quality of life for the residents that live there, benefit to the residents that live around those properties, when it comes to property values and even in selling prices for properties. All these things become important. But as landlords push, as the city pushed to correct certain behaviors in community, this does impact the tenants that live there. As landlords are pushing up more money, and they may raise the price of the tenants that live there, therefore causing displacement. And then the tenants that are there have nowhere else to go, or they're looking for the next landlord that's going to put them in very similar conditions. So having incentives in place that would impact landlords and that would allow tenants to remain in those properties as improvements are being conducted would be huge for the tenants that's there, and maybe an incentive for landlords to keep prices that are reasonable for those tenants. You see, is another aspect of this I wanted to make sure that I hit on as well. And I believe that also as we're pushing this for tenants to have an understanding of their rights as tenants. I think there's an educational component that goes along with this that we can do a better job at really pushing to it so that our tenants are informed. And I'm sure much more of this will come out as we continue with this presentation as well. And can we go to the next slide? Okay, all right. So I don't know that when we get into this part,
I talked about it some already.
Okay.
I would just say with the upon sale inspection, we can't do anything that's going to get in the way of home sales. So we have to figure out a way, while that's a good thing to implement, realtors and buyers and sellers, we can't impede home sales. And there are ways that you can implement this kind of process and have it be expedited and not get in the way of home sales. And I'm not an expert in that, but I'll defer to Commissioner Halt and some of the others who have had deeper conversations around that. It's just in order for the real estate professionals in our community, to support this, we've got to assure them that we understand how important it is that sales happen without delay.
Excuse me, I have a question. D'Angelo,
Yes.
you mentioned incentives for landlords. What might some of those incentives be?
It's a good question. Well, some of the things that I thought about, and anybody can jump in as well. Some things is maybe assistance with some of the renovations, maybe a tax break or a tax freeze for a period of time while they're working on these particular items. It can be something as simple as maybe, I know that they have so much time to respond, maybe be a little bit lenient with the time that's given. We have landlords that own multiple properties on the east side, and to be hit with a 30 or 60 day or 90-day notice may not be enough time for them to really properly attend to all the properties they have. So maybe giving them a little bit more time to make these renovations. Having access to other resources so that they can find monies that can help with those, that will help with those improvements as well. So it's not just sending them a notification that they have to make these improvements or make these changes, but having some information or resources out there that would allow them to tap into some other kind of funding that would help them to achieve this, where it's not maybe all coming out of pocket. I think the more that it comes out of pocket, the tenants are gonna get the blunt of that. The more they pay, the more the tenants are gonna suffer. So if there are other incentive programs, there are other programs in place where they can tap into some different kind of resources, or even some city resources, or if there's grants available or loan money available that landlords can tap into. Whereas, because being a landlord is a business, so if they're able to tap into loans to help to tend to their business, where they know they have a certain period of time to pay that back, maybe that can be a resource where it's not all this money out of pocket all at this one time. But as we're moving forward to push these initiatives, to make sure that that we have these things in place, that we have some kind of resource in place that people can go back to address some of the concerns that we're bringing up. I believe that there are a few landlords, I'm not going to mention any names, but there are a few landlords that I know are, for lack of a better word, making a lot of money off of rundown properties and putting tenants in very horrible living conditions and not reinvesting a penny of that in it, because all it is for them is a way to obtain more funds. And they're pulling money out of the community. That money is not being surfaced back into the community. And so the tenants are losing, the city's losing, everyone's losing, the landlords making bank. And there needs to be some things put in place to deal with that. But then you have some other landlords that maybe just getting into the game and they need more resources. So there needs to be somebody that can kind of control how the resources are being allocated, because those who have access to more resources tend to be able to find more resources and gain those resources, but there needs to be some way to level the playing field. But also protecting the tenants. And I don't know what's the best way of doing that, having the city attorney more involved in it. But there has to be some way to better protect tenants as these programs are being, these citations, these warnings are being placed out. Because you've got some tenants that are, and I know this from experience, they're not paying rent by checks or cash or money orders. They're being pushed to pay their rent in cash. They don't receive any receipts. There's no way to prove that they have paid their rent that month. So the tenant the landlord kind of have them in a really odd position, because at any moment they can say, well, they didn't pay rent following eviction notice. The tenant has nothing that they can draw from to protect themselves, because this is the system that's set up. So there has to be some kind of way to protect the tenants as we're going through this process. Because everyone is gonna suffer.
I just want to add, D'Angelo, if I could, the other aspect that the city needs to consider is strategically, what is the right balance between owner occupied and rental units in the city? Now, we went from 90% owner occupied to 50. My own experience of being a landlord on the east side, it's an extremely lucrative proposition. And it's evidenced by the fact that those landlords have acquired more and more homes and failed to put the resources back into the homes. So part of this is really when the new sheriff comes into town and all those landlords realize that the game's over for doing what they've been doing. And that needs to happen in each one of these communities. Those landlords, over a period of few years, work their way out of the business or they put the money back in. Most of those lousy landlords that D'Angelo is speaking of are not going to be here in 10 years if we do anything like with what we ought to do to improve that. So one of our goals would say, let's get our owner occupied to 66%. 2/3 of the homes in Adrian are owned by people. When we do that, then we have to incentivize those people to be able to buy and to maintain those homes. So that's part of the strategy that you as the commissioners will develop as you implement a strategy for this revitalization. It truly will be up to you and the city administration to be able to define what priorities you want from this presentation.
I would add, Lad, that there are communities that have launched similar rental inspection initiatives and full force out of the gate. We've been negligent, we're going to do it, which we have done. But what they kind of did in time is realize, hey, wow, this stuff is happening, and that's not necessarily what we wanted. So they, in two cases that I know of, they backed off a little bit and they really focused on health and safety issues first. Didn't force every single thing that has been neglected for 20 plus years now has to be done. There's no bargaining. They kind of said, okay, wait a minute. Let's really focus on health and safety issues, smoke detectors and whatever the really, really important things are. And year two, then we come back and, okay, I'm going to ask you to do windows, or I'm going to ask you to do, there's just some, I'm not saying that, that's just what I know a few communities have done as incentives to landlords to give them a little bit of time. So there's different ways. We came out of the gate full force, man, you're going to do everything that you haven't done for 20 years.
But the city already does that when it comes to rental inspections. They'll give you a list, and then Jake will tell you, these are things that be fixed within 30 days. And that's like smoke detectors in the rooms, other safety measures. But then like, if you show good faith that you have a major project you need to do, like a roof or a porch, you send them an email, say, hey, I'm on the list. Here's my estimate. They can't get to it till March. The city's okay with that, as long as you make a good effort. Now they're gonna follow up, but those things are already in place right now as to where the emergency stuff goes right away. That's first line, and then below that is the stuff that needs to be fixed. They're a little bit more, whether it be expensive and that. When it comes to landlords, I don't have a lot of sympathy for them. And I know it's a double-edged sword when it comes to owner-occupied support, from the city and landlords. But like you said, it's a business, and when you buy, we have been a slumlord haven for decades. And Tom Fallhaber used to talk about it every meeting, every meeting. I used to tell him he just would exhaust us by talking about it. But I had my own agenda and trying to get it done. But now I think we need to wake up and shape the bad landlords, right? But incentivizing landlords, I struggle with that. Owner occupied, the widowed, the senior citizen on a fixed income, the couple that's just starting out on fixed income. I'm all for support that. But landlords, you need to put that margin in your price. And yeah, you might not get 4% of rents on it, but you may get, you may get 1%, which what a real estate investor, that's the goal you want to hit, is 1% of what you sell the property for. So just want to throw a little thought in there about that.
Well, rent control, any sort of rent control is not legal. That's not allowed. But legislation was passed a couple of years ago that allows municipalities to offer incentives. So whatever those kinds of things are that are working in communities, we need to do more investigation. and figure out what makes sense.
I would support, like, if the landlord that owns 50 houses, more than likely that individual doesn't live in our community. They live out in the outskirts. They don't live with the community where their properties are at. And I think we all know who we're talking about, right? So I would, what was that?
I was gonna, but when we're talking about incentivizing landlords, I'm a little concerned about the violation of fair housing laws, et cetera, too. So, am I jumping ahead, or is that in your, how are we going to help our citizens that are renting in this? And I certainly don't want to incentivize if they're violating fair housing law, and things like that. So is that something that has
That's that
been
education
discussed
piece.
and, okay.
It has to be there,
Mhm.
you know.
But I get where the angel's going. It's a double-edged sword, because this is the last thing we want, displacement. That's the last thing you want, but don't use that over our head. Because I think you've had a realtor tell you that about, you had to replace windows, so I gotta raise the rent. That's, you know what? That's morally wrong. But they're gonna do it. I mean, we can't control
But we
that.
can't control
We can't
that, and they
control it,
have
so
a
that's what
right
we have
to.
brainstorm as a
and they're
group and
doing
figure out
it.
how we're gonna handle that, so.
So that's like, whew, could we get into that or what? Yeah, so go on, because
We'll go to the next slide.
Yeah.
I don't have the eye.
go to the next slide, please, Michelle. So we have to invest in the old housing stock. We know that. Mark mentioned that we have properties that are 100 years old or more, and many of them in the city of Adrian and the whole state of Michigan, really. We are not unique in that sense. But, you know, if we don't figure out a way to invest in properties, then we have some options. I mean, people who have money are voluntarily going to keep up their home. That's one thing they're going to do. Or guess what? Code enforcement comes along and they're forced to do it. Or, hey, I don't want to invest. I'm selling this thing and I'm out, right? Okay, so that happens and it's going to happen. And then there are the folks that walk away from it. And they stop paying their taxes and it ends up with the county, and then they're in the land bank, and then a tax sale. And, you know, we've got to figure some things out so that the tax sale doesn't end up with somebody buying it, and 3 years later, it's back in the tax sale and all of that. But these are basically the options for people. Fix it up, voluntarily or not, sell it, or just let it go. And then who pays for demolition? I'm not going to get into this a lot, but there's a relatively new field of study called domicology, like say in the last 10 years, where a few universities in the country have really started to look at the life of structures. And we're fortunate in that Michigan State here in Michigan is one of those universities that is really looking at this and realizing properties, especially residential, of old building practices at about 100 years, unless they've been really invested in, they probably, many of them need to be demolished. But we don't have any system in place to pay for that once they end up, the person walks away, right? So it ends up falling on the city, which is ultimately the taxpayer who pays for demolition. And as a country, we need to figure out, what do we do about the life cycle of properties and have funding planned in monthly payments over the life of that property so that when it needs to be demolished, there's funds there to do it and it doesn't fall on the taxpayer. So it's just an interesting field that's really developing quickly. And I'm personally interested in it, so I stuck it in this presentation.
I have
So,
another question, Lynn.
yeah,
And I first came to mind when I'm thinking about the historic district. And I don't believe that this has come up in any of our other meetings, but why can't we say, why can't we take a district like the historic district and say, if you're gonna buy property here, you're going to keep it a single family dwelling. You can't chop it up and put 4 apartments in there, because I've already seen that happening, you know, in our historic district. And so why can't you do that in other parts of town?
well, that's a planning and zoning issue, and I don't know.
In the historic district here, you can't do that anymore. It's enough, you know, we've got homes that are have have apartments in them,
Right.
but those are dwellings that went into effect. I don't know. Do you have any idea?
Yeah, mine was post-World War II.
You're
I
supposed
went to
to,
5
so,
apartments and an office, and now I chose, when I purchased it 30-some years ago, that it was, we made it into 3, a triplex.
right,
And
okay.
you can't go back to 4 or 5.
Right,
And once you go
you're
down,
grandfathered in,
right,
but you can't go back.
those
So-
ordinances are.
At least, yeah, not in the historic district.
Right. So Michelle, advance the slide and we'll move through this. Yeah, so, we need to bring these resources. There are resources available for repairs right now. And we just haven't done a great job as a city, as a community to make people aware of them. But Habitat has had a repair program for a few years now, and they partner with Consumers Energy and bring grants. Lenco works with Federal Home Loan Bank of Indianapolis and brings $7,500 grants, up to $12,500 grants to homeowners right now. Housing Help has a veterans fund, and so on and so on. My point is that there are resources available in community now, and people don't know about it. But I think the new community revitalization coordinator, will learn about these things quickly and begin to help people, really bring people and resources together. And I do know that Greg has talked about loans from the city, right? Microloans, low interest loans to help people. So we want to pursue those things. Go ahead, Michelle.
This is an example of a property that was tagged for blight here in Adrian. It's actually located across from Springbrook Middle School. And this is a senior citizen that lives in this property. The house, the garage is pretty much, you can kind of see the conditions in. It's been held up on one side by some 2x4s. And so this individual received a letter from the city and reached out to a number of organizations, and Habitat for Humanity was one. I received that phone call. And we were able to gather some residents from the community to tackle this challenge. The homeowner is a single individual, senior citizen, not in physical health to be able to deal with this situation of this nature. And it took us some time to get all the resources together to figure out what our game plan would be.
Go ahead and
to tackle
advance,
this.
Michelle, while he's talking. Go ahead.
Yep, and it was myself and 2 other residents that tackled this. Goodwill chipped in to provide a dumpster for the homeowner, and the homeowner had chipped in some dollars as well to help with the removal of this. And it took us 4 hours to work on it. Myself and 2 other individuals, Miguel Rivera, which was here, was one of the other volunteers as well. But this was about a 3 to 4 week plan in order to tackle this project. And it cost us somewhere about $1,500 to deal with it. So with the assistance of a few organizations, Habitat donated all the resources that, as far as tools that we needed. Goodwill donated the dumpster. The owner was able to donate some funds so we can get other material as well. And one other gentleman that was there that was really knowledgeable as far as how to deconstruct this garage and to remove all the parts of it safely. But these are some examples of what community partnerships will look like when it comes to tackling blight and having a prepared response when a person receives this kind of a notice. This was a very frightening experience for the homeowner. To
Go
receive
ahead
a
and
notice,
advance, Michelle.
receiving this notice and not knowing what to do. Habitat for Humanity has this Rock the Block event that it does, that it did every year for, I think, 4 or 5 years in the Parish Park community. This was a homeowner whose property needed a lot of attention, and they're a senior couple raising a disabled grown child. And they just didn't have the financial resources to combat this. This was too large of a project for them. And of course, they had lived in this property, I believe it was 25 years, and they have history in the community. They would like to live in a better situation. They just couldn't do anything about it. Through Rock the Block and about 42 plus volunteers across, I think about a week and a half period, because we had to do prep work before our Rock the Block team would come in. And then we had to do continual work after the Rock the Block team left. So you're looking at the repair, the deconstruction of their porch, to rebuild the porch, a repaint of the entire house, and work on the side of the house to bring one portion back up to level, and just work all the way around the house. And we have received a grant from Lowe's that year, totaling about $40,000, $20,000, which was used towards rock block. So tackling blight can be a very expensive thing for the tenants, and it brings a lot of concern to the tenants. And I believe that this is an opportunity where the city can be proactive, where we are not just notifying residents, homeowners, specifically homeowner occupied, that we want them to pay attention to the care of their home, but that the city has measures put in place that would assist residents as well. And then is also a matter of bringing education to the homeowners, because one of the concerns is, well, if I do this work, what are my taxes going to look like after I'm done? So it's bringing awareness and education, because I just found out not too long ago that it doesn't raise your taxes to work on your house and make it look better. So that's absolutely new to me. So now I get to share that in the community, and my thoughts is, well, if I'm just learning that, how many other residents are just learning that or doesn't know that?
Greg, can I ask, did you say it's limited to the rate of inflation? No, I'm
Yes.
sorry, cost of living? I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, taxable value is an inflation rate multiplier that the state establishes each year based on the consumer price index. And so, yes, any other than additions to the structure, the rate at which the taxable value of the home is opposed to the true cash value, which rises with the market. The taxable value that you pay your taxes on rises only by that inflation multiplier each year, as long as you don't transfer ownership of the property.
Right. So D'Angelo and I learned that this week, but we can speak to people now. Don't be afraid to fix up your home. It's not going to increase your property taxes. Misunderstandings. Go ahead, Michelle.
So what this shows is, in total, is this has to become a community thing, a community effort. And we have numerous resources, numerous partners, numerous individuals in community and businesses that are willing to pour into this. And our proof of it is Rock the Block. Every time we get ready to initiate Rock the Block, we have organizations, businesses that are volunteering their time, their resources, and their finances to push this initiative and these efforts in our communities. And it's community changing. We always see a ripple effect every time we conduct a Rock the Block in the neighborhood. Once one property comes up, people begin to repair and do other modifications to their property. You just see this ripple effect take place in the community because people want to take pride in where they live at. The area where we can be most effective is if we're going to take on a blight initiative, instead of it going out and having this very negative narrative that goes out behind it, we can show that we are doing this initiative, but we are providing these resources. We are mindful of the community that may be hit the hardest. And I'm not saying that the east side is the target of blight. I'm saying that whenever blight notifications hit the east side, it's like a huge blow to the community because everybody starts conversing within the community about what's taking place. We worked with one family, the Hawks on Erie Street. By the time I was notified about what was going on, that they had received notification of blight, the whole neighborhood was talking about it. And this negative narrative went out. And so myself and a few others, we worked diligently with them to have those things resolved. Also, there needs to be communication because they received this notification and had no idea exactly what it was they were supposed to tackle. So I believe that this new position, the community revitalization coordinator, they've got a huge task in front of them to really connect with the community, not just to sit behind a desk, but really be engaging with the community, especially homeowner occupied folks that are in marginalized communities, living on fixed incomes and aging in place. So you have this diversity of population within this area. Also, we also received notifications. I got a phone call. Actually, no, it wasn't a phone call. It was a visit from an individual whose daughter brought him in because he received a blight notification and he was blind. And had his daughter not come to visit, he wouldn't have known So it's got to be this connection as well. So as we're pushing this initiative, and I believe that tackling properties in our community is going to increase the quality and value for everyone that resides in our community. So it's something that we can't just ignore because we have other underlying issues we have to tackle, but being intentional with understanding that we do have other aspects of this that we have to tackle as well.
Go ahead and advance, Michelle. You know, there are some benefits to completing the certification process for the redevelopment ready communities. There will be more competitive in applying for grants as a city. So we're just really encouraging you guys to push that through, and Greg knows some about that and can talk about that. We have a land bank in our community that we have got to take advantage of. Not every community has a land bank. There's going to be a lot of new sources of funding out there, and we can get that funding for our city. We can do that, and we just need to be ready. So Michelle, go to the next slide. What we are asking you to consider is $10 million over 10 years. Okay, it's gonna take a lot, and money is just one of the things on the table. And we can, you know, it's up to you guys to figure out how to do that, whether you start heavy with a couple million on year one and then you taper down over time, or you want to do $1 million a year for 10 years. I don't know. We'll figure that out. But we're asking you to figure out how to get $10 million in this budget so that over the next 10 years, we can invest in this city. And that's what it is. It's an investment. And if you wonder, gosh, what would you spend that money on? Well, we've got to give incentives to contractors and builders to come here, probably provide some additional down payment assistance, matching maybe some MISHDA money that comes in, and do that through Habitat. Some of the communities that we've talked to, their #1 partner in this endeavor was Habitat for Humanity. And so, you know, I'm not even wearing my Habitat hat right now or anymore, but they were the strongest partner that helped turn those cities around. You know, whatever the incentives are that make sense to not have rents going up, do these loans that Greg is talking about, and we've got to demolish some properties. That's just to name a few of how you might spend $10 million. Okay, and the next slide, Michelle, might be blank, which, you know, we've talked a little bit about what that would do, but could I ask Scott Westfall to make some closing comments? Yeah, go ahead.
I get the fortune of speaking to everybody after Lynn let everybody know this might cost $10 million. So, thank you for that. I became interested in Adrian's blight problem about 4 years ago after listening to residents and city leaders grieve over the housing conditions in town. Their words were clear that hundreds upon hundreds of homes were unkept, and Adrian was in a downward spiral. About 3.5 years ago, with the help of a former city commissioner, I spent about 5 weeks collecting data. Together, we drove down every single street in Adrian. We spent 2 seconds at each residential property and just saying, hey, is there anything that jumps out in 2 seconds? So after a month of collecting data, we identified 642 homes with significant blight. Now, I am a big believer in the Fourth Amendment, restricting unreasonable government demands such as searches and seizures. And as a property owner, I am all for your rights until they infringe upon other people's rights. Collapsed porches, broken and boarded up windows, strewn trash, junk and debris. These conditions negatively impact neighborhoods and homes, which are most people's largest investment. Now, if my economic argument is not persuading you, then I'm going to turn to my morality argument here. Data shows that between 70 and 80% of Adrian's blighted homes are rental properties. Because we've fallen decades behind on enforcement and upkeep, Adrian has become a haven for slumlords. I understand that some people don't like to use strong language like slumlords, but if a person has zero reinvestment back into their property, they have little to no care for their tenants' well-being or the quality of life, they are a slumlord. Now, I've spoken to many residents over the last couple of years, and some of them are afraid to speak up on their own out of fear that they will be evicted. Some of their hardships include backed up sewage in their basements, holes in walls, black mold where children live, non-working toilets, being forced to use buckets outdoors. These are unacceptable conditions. Now, to tackle this problem, as we've talked here tonight, we assembled a very diverse team. 15 people, City Hall employees, commissioners, Madam Mayor, residents from both the east and west sides, along with representatives from the A3 Coalition. And we discovered that 3 communities across the US have developed dynamic approaches to carefully and thoroughly eradicating blight. As we've learned tonight, these top 3 cities in the US, 2 of which we've now visited, are Mobile, Alabama, St. Petersburg, Florida, and Wyandotte, Michigan. Mobile taught us that we need political buy-in. This must be jointly led by our mayor, our city commission, and our city manager. St. Petersburg taught us that we need to incentivize local builders to redevelop within city limits. And Wyandotte, who perhaps has taught us the most, told us that we need to step up enforcement with upon sale ordinances, rental inspections, even hiring a magistrate. And although their realty community did push back very hard years ago when they implemented this, in the words of one of their longest serving realtors, Jerry Miller, he said, "I was against this at first, but I learned quickly that this is what was going to save Wyandotte," and it did. Now our team has taken the best parts of what these 3 cities have taught and offered, and we've generated the initial framework for a plan. This plan is intended to enhance property conditions without increasing property taxes and eliminating tenants' inhumane conditions, essentially improving people's quality of life. Let me be clear, this is not a plan to punish homeowners who are on fixed incomes, the elderly, the disabled, widows, etc. This plan offers solutions for people who are giving their best effort to do it the right way, but are falling just a little bit short. This plan is not one to raise people's property taxes. As City Administrator Greg Elliott has stated to our team, property taxes are not raised in the case, or they're only raised in cases of home enhancement or augmentation, such as square footage, not because exteriors get painted and structures are now fixed. This is an initiative to revitalize neighborhoods and enhance the quality of life. In conclusion here, past commissions have wanted to solve this problem. They were unable, not because they didn't have the desire, but because they were likely unaware that other communities had developed dynamic solutions for blight. They were unsuccessful, not because they didn't have the motivation, but because they didn't have the roadmap. You do now. From your commission seats, you have the power to literally change people's lives with this. It's a simple plan, but it won't be easy. You'll likely face skeptics and haters telling you this can't be done here. To that I ask, who do we want to be? With your leadership, it can be done. We can be the 4th American city to reverse this downward spiral, rewrite its destiny, and fix the blight problem. This can be a transformational moment in Adrian's history, and I believe your finest hour as commissioners. I look forward to watching each and every one of you go to work over the next weeks and months. Good luck to you, and God bless as you embark upon this journey. Thank you.
I have a question right off the bat, and that is that I think everybody realizes that, you know, I'm all for this plan, and I know it'll cost a lot of money, and I had heard the $10 million figure before, but what I would like to know is how did we arrive at the $10 million figure? Because I can see people in the community, as we try to roll this out, ask that same question. And so it's a lot of money. I know this is going to take a lot of money over a lot of time. We're talking $10 million, we're talking 10 years, but I think that people will ask that question. So how did we arrive at 10 million?
Commissioner, I'll take a quick shot at that. We pulled the number out of the hat. When you look at all these communities, they have the opportunity to do an overlay TIF program. Each one did. Wyandotte did a very large area, St. Pete's did a very large area, as did Mobile, Alabama. I just want to say that all of these communities, as you connect with them and talk to them, they will say unequivocally, these programs do not cost money. They pay dividends. They get the money back. Those of us who've owned real estate for a long time know that between the city, the county, and the school system, they're the landlords. We just pay the taxes every year. And if we don't pay the taxes, we lose, we get kicked out. So the long-term advantage for making this program work all flows back to the government entities that where we live. So doing things like buying junk homes and tearing them down, incentivizing builders, Habitat, whoever. In St. Pete's, for instance, their whole program, they took a 16-block area. Those of you who've been to St. Pete's have probably visited the tourist areas. If you've been there and looked at what we did, my wife and I spent a day with the the local incentive person. He took us all over the city and showed us areas that they've emphasized change and areas where they haven't gotten to yet. And they're making a phenomenal difference. It's a wraparound service. It's the city police, the city traffic lights, the trash, every single aspect of this 16-block area that they go after is where the focus is. And when you go from one area to the next area, you can see exactly how those investments, they would take four or eight buildings and get them built. And as we've heard from earlier, those change the rest of the neighborhood. Once those neighbors see that there's energy and resources being put into those very rough communities, and I can assure you, those blocks are way worse than anything we have in Adrian. I think our job is going to be pretty easy compared to what we've seen in some of these other communities. But the idea is you can't do it without putting that investment in and making those changes stick. And in order to do that, you have to put the resources in. It's time, talent, and treasure from the community. It's at every level we have to emphasize that this is no longer going to be a secondary issue in our community. It's going to be a primary issue. Everything that we value, we put money into. Well, no matter what it is. And your job as commissioners is to struggle with all of the issues and all of the desires and all the priorities we have in our community. We're saying that this is an absolute return on investment and an absolute need that we need to get into. And so how you're going to spend the $10 million, not us. I think it should be 20 million or 30 million, and we would get it back, get the return on it. So we'll help you lay out a budget, but that's really something that the city administration and leaders should do, not us.
The cities that I'm aware of, Memphis, even Toledo, was far more than 10 million, far more.
Who did?
Toledo,
Okay.
but Memphis had an initiative that they launched in 2012 and they started with 20 million. So, I mean, we said, we're going to ask you for 10, you know.
So I heard Mr. Westfall say that 70 to 80% of the blighted homes he looked at were rentals. And looking at blocks, it's like investing in somebody else's business, right? So Commissioner Howell said that's a lot of these landlords have that as their business. Are we looking at investing that money in rentals, or is these are personal properties?
We're not advocating for investment in rentals.
Okay.
We're advocating in investment in owner occupied properties.
Okay.
And the thing about, when it comes to the investment, all three communities, and like, remember, like first is political buy-in, that's us. That has to be first and foremost. And I remember, when Tom would talk about it all the time, it's like, we're all worried about our own things when you run for office. So, that was his thing, and it wasn't mine at the time, and so I think that the money part of it, whether it be microloans for owner occupied homes or giving incentives like, you have a blanket piece of property because we take down a house. Because I remember 5 years ago, we got a grant. I don't know, I think we took down 20 houses or something like that 5 years ago or so. Stuff like that. We keep looking for those opportunities. That $10 million isn't necessarily general fund money, right? So, and when it comes to the public, I think that, the public doesn't like when we spend money, but I think that when we spend money on something like this, I think that they know they'll see a return on it. So, and I think we'll all get some questions, but, and again, that number is just the number that, because this is what it brought to us, and I'm like, I said, there's a big number at first, but I think that that's grant opportunities, that's a lot of things, whether it be, freezing taxes for developers, give developers incentives to build more housing, because we have a housing issue too. So, anyway, who wants to get in that cat, we can do that, but I have no interest in giving incentives for landlords, but again, it's one of those things where will they raise the rents? That's the only thing, morally that I have concern with. But it's a double-edged sword.
Let me ask this question, because I agree with you when you say, you take a hard stance on, I don't want to incentivize landlords at all, but you might have somebody over here who has 3 to 5 rental properties, and they're doing their best to keep them up and things. Then you have this guy over here who has 75 or 100 properties, and that person isn't doing a darn thing. I mean, is there an area, is there a line that we sort of draw in the sand and we say, okay, this guy over here, he's showing that he's making some efforts, and we would be willing to help that landlord out with his business. But over here where it's very obvious, and D'Angelo mentioned, there's 3 or 4 that, we know what their game plan is. Do you draw a line between those, or do you just say, if rental houses are your income, we're not going to have benefits for you?
I think if you have your properties in an LLC, that's legit business. So, I mean, if you again, you have the small players, like I only have 2. I have 2, and so, but you have people that own 50, 75, 100 different houses, and I think the word's getting out. It's like, by a couple of meetings ago, we were even talking about it, and a lot of landlords showed up. Good landlords didn't show up. I know a couple of them that showed up. They're not good landlords. So I get where you're going with that. Like, what's the, but I don't know how you differentiate.
I don't know. I mean, I know that owner occupied, that's completely different than a rental business. But I'm just asking everybody in the room, how do we feel about that?
And we have so many people that when 07, 08 came in, and they just came in when the housing prices were nothing. And they came in and scooped up and bought a ton of them. A lot of them, I know a person that paid cash for a lot of them, and they live outside this community, and now housing prices are up, and now they're just taking the money and leaving the city and not doing anything to those properties. So I guess my question is, would the city be willing to give me a loan to improve my building on South Main? That'd be the argument of people that actually maintain their properties, that are businessmen and women. So again, I have all the compassion in the world for people that are on fixed incomes but I get where you're going with that, because it's tough. We know the bad players in
My concern
town.
about this is there's what did he say, 600 blighted homes in our community. That's a lot, but 70 to 80% of those are rentals. We're gonna have to make a plan there to help, right? Because that's the majority. So we're gonna have to come up with some kind of plan there to help. But that does concern me that we're helping businesses and then, the community. So, but I do think that loans, et cetera, are a good way to go about that. So if it's a business like that, we can look at, that's gonna be how we're gonna have to look at that, and time or something like that, and being more lenient with time for them to get some things accomplished. But that's a lot of rental properties that are the majority of our
And
problems.
that's just exterior. That's just,
Right,
he and the other
right.
commissioner looked and they stopped for 10 seconds, they see something, so that's not counting what's inside, so.
But another thing to look at this, and I know we've had this discussion, and Lynn and D'Angelo and I had this discussion, that if we can incentivize builders to get more units here, then they don't have that hold necessarily as much on their tenants, because that's the problem right now. They know that these tenants are stuck because there are no units available. But if we can get more units here and we can put the incentives that way, that defrays it. And then they're like, oh, well, we gotta keep our tenants because they could easily move somewhere else. Like they're not going to be playing the game that they're playing right now. And
We
I,
That's
tried
very
that.
scary for
We
me.
tried that several times.
My day
with
job, so.
Garfield and McKinley, you know, we've tried to get some apartments built in town. What can we do that we haven't tried already? I'm sure that there are things, but we have tried to get apartments.
Well, that
built.
passed, but they didn't get their state funding. That's why. it didn't get
Exactly.
approved.
So,
that's
so
first off, like,
we did what we needed to do,
Yeah.
and it still didn't happen.
But what we didn't do was say, you know what, we'll put in the sewer, we'll get that infrastructure in for you. Let us get that in, and then you come in and build some units on that. That's where $10 million is gonna go. You're gonna have to put an investment and get some things in there in order to get developers to come in. Because even if we put, so McKinley's 1.7 acres, okay? And it would be 4 years ago, it was gonna be, Kirk Valentine figured $300,000 to get the infrastructure in. So it'd be more than that now, right? That's one little lot that could have had 22 units on it. We've got to invest in that sort of stuff, and then they build the units, right? And you work out the funding on it, so you know that they don't walk away with all the profit, and in time the city is somehow reimbursed. But we're going to have to invest in some of those infrastructure things to get developers to come. We didn't do anything. We honestly, what did we do? We did nothing to incentivize anyone to develop McKinley. Nothing. We put a sign up there for sale. Come along. We had community meetings. We knew what the residents that lived around there wanted, but we didn't offer any incentives to developers.
We offer a pilot, which is pretty substantial tax.
It is.
You offered a developer a pilot?
Yes.
Both of those projects were the Garfield projects. I mean, were
They
pilot.
just weren't big enough to satisfy the developer. Now, you know, the one they wanted, what they wanted 10%, and we were willing to give them 6%. And yes,
I wasn't aware of a pilot at McKinley, so sorry about that.
So, yeah.
McKinley ever advanced to that stage. I don't know if anybody ever came and made an application on McKinley's side. Garfield.
Garfield, yes, I was aware of
They
Garfield.
didn't Garfield.
So I believe that we would have done, I would have voted for that too. So we're already giving them, trying to give them a substantial tax break, and they're still not building.
But they want state money to help them build the actual
And
structure.
there's
which
Yeah.
is
nothing we
like,
can do about
right.
that.
right.
We can't affect that.
But there is a severe housing, and I'm
I
stuck in my
agree.
bubble sometimes.
But the city of,
That's-
if you read the, one of the strategic plans, I don't remember if it was parks or the other one that I just read recently. I was home doing nothing else. Adrian is landlocked. We have very little land to build on unless we tear down houses. And as you know, tearing down buildings and houses costs
A lot of money.
just as much as building a new one practically.
Right.
So we've got to tackle that where can we build new housing units, new rental units? So that's
Affordable
one
housing.
thing. Affordable housing.
Right.
Mhm. Scott mentioned about the 650, outside blighted homes 4 or 5 years ago. I'd really like to know now, after we've had our rental and our other inspections for a year now, has it been a year? Probably.
It's been a year.
Some of
that
them have
checks
been
it out.
fixed.
Yeah, where are we at now? This was one thing we discussed last year is, will we even need this person in 5 years? Because hopefully the second code enforcement officer is going to work themselves out of a job. But I'd like to know where we're at and how much have we come in a year and a half that they've been on the job. I think that gentrification is going to happen. And I mean, if you look at Royal Oak, my husband's from there, parents sold their house 25 years ago. You look at it now, they would have made a killing if they sold their house now. Royal Oak, Ferndale, all of those. Every single property has been gentrified. All of the middle-class people have been pushed out. I don't know where they live in the area, honestly. So that's going to happen. And we need to be prepared for that. If we want to be able to still have people who can live in homes and rental properties and afford them that have been fixed up, we got to figure out how to do that before we start this program. Because otherwise they're just gonna end up with Kelly, or they're gonna end up leaving. So before we do anything, which I'm all for, I see very, very few things of this whole process, program, whatever, that I would go, absolutely not. But there's a lot of things we gotta work out before we put anything
But
down.
you've already started the process. You hired Jake and the
We did.
process is already underway. And we
Yes.
didn't have a plan before that. So we're just,
We did. have a plan.
gentrification is inevitable, but you can try to minimize it. Okay? I mean, that it is inevitable.
Yeah.
And any time you're going to invest in a community, there will be we learned there will be an element of gentrification. It's going to happen. Ultimately, the solution to gentrification is jobs.
Exactly.
Jobs that pay people enough to stay in the area. It's straight up economic development is your solution to gentrification. That's your best solution there.
I agree. It is. We need jobs that people can afford to live here.
Right, that doesn't, okay, I don't have to leave now because I have a job that pays me enough to stay here. That's the most effective solution to
And jobs that
gentrification.
people, unfortunately, in today's day and age, want to work at. I just heard there's a term on the news about people who are not working, and now I've forgotten, of course.
Working at home, are you talking about?
No, it was the people who are choosing not to work.
Great resignation.
Oh, the Great Resignation?
No, that's not it.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's another term for people who are choosing not to work. And it's essentially they don't like the jobs that are out there.
Right.
I think that some of the problems that people face with some of the jobs is in the market we're in, people are working jobs for peanuts. And they're given an awful lot of their time, awful lot of the resources. They have kids, families are trying to manage. And when you're working 40, 50, I used to work at a factory, and I made $11.79 an hour, 40 hours a week. That was after working in an industry where I made $70,000 a year. That is an incredible lifestyle change. And no matter, and I stayed on East Church Street. I stayed in a house, a 3-bedroom where I paid rent, all utilities, including trash removal, like $11.79 an hour. No matter how hard you try to swim upstream, you're still going downstream. And at that point, people will just give up. Because at that point, you might as well just take unemployment for what you can. And I remember that would becoming an option. If maybe I take unemployment and try to figure some other things out. And I think that's what we're struggling at in this community. And I think there needs to be some attention to certain policies as well as some reversals of evictions on people's records. There needs to be
Policy too.
Yeah,
That's true.
Because it's crippling our community for the ones who are trying to find a way to live and survive. Because you have a portion of the community that's not living, they're just surviving. And that's the truth of where they are, that's the truth of where their families are. And it's not that they don't want to work, it's how long do you kill yourself working a job that can replace you in a heartbeat? And that's not going to pay you anything that you can really live off of. You're working just to make the minimum of ends meet. And I think that's where we are. And if we can find a way, because I believe that gentrification is going to be a part of the results of our action in the community when it comes to blight. We can't be intentional with displacement, but that is economic development, but that's policies. That we put policies in place that we invite employment in that's not just gonna pay our people a wage, but a livable and living wage, once we determine what a living wage is for our community. I think that has to be really looked at as well, because we have factories here. And you have a lot of people working at factories, but they're throwing peanuts at folks when they have to go home and figure out how to live in their environment. And those are things I think that we have to be intentional about as well. So as we're inviting developers in, consider inviting businesses in, but having a kind of real conversation with those businesses, or creating policies that will address that. And I don't know if that will be something that is not attractive enough for businesses to consider coming to Adrian. But maybe that the higher wage will potentially grab a better, not better, but a more committed sort of people that will really commit to those businesses, and you won't see such high turnover. In the factories in Lenawee, there is extreme high turnover. And you're finding that to be the case in a lot of other businesses as well. But we're having a lot of turnover because wages and treatment is just all right.
I think a big piece of this is, and to start, your education is going to be one of the biggest pieces of this, because when you talk about the wages and then you talk about getting these homes fixed and then rent being raised, I think we really have to tackle fair housing laws. I mean, some of the things you were discussing are violations of health codes and health mandates, and disgusting. And how we've let that slide, I quite honestly, I can't comprehend. But I think one of the biggest pieces that you have to put out with this to start is education, because if we don't, then the 70 to 80% is going to overfill the shelters, and they're already taxed. So,
Well, I think that, when Lynn made the comment of, the Commissioner Roberts, that we already been starting it, is that hiring Jake, hiring CRCs, and assurance bringing another code enforcement officer in the field. But I think from a, whether it be the upon sale ordinance, as that gives it at least the aesthetic look of blight taken away. As you drive through the city, you don't see falling down porches, broken windows. But right now it's budget time. We got capital coming up, and then we have operational right after that. So, when Ladd and I got elected the first time, I mean, we had about $2.3 million in our fund balance, and we're over 10 now. And so I'll just throw it out there that the citizens don't want us to be a bank. They want us to provide services and quality of life amenities. And like Mr. Murray said, we were not going to get a bigger return if we don't, without investing in this initiative. And again, it's all stuff that we know, but when it comes to the ordinance, the upon sale ordinance, and then, getting Glenn and Jake both dual in the field, we're gonna get a lot of traction. The CRC can be that bridge, the communication with landlords, whether it be emails, getting them up to code, educational component, but the plan has already started to roll, and Mary's right, and we got a lot of traction. We see our packets. Jake's up and down them, with his enforcement tickets. So, but I think that, the upon sale inspection just gives that, it pretty much gives us another inspector out there, essentially, at least the exterior part of it. So, but again, we're not trying to slow down businesses. We know that, we're not trying to hinder businesses, but we need to throw some money at it. And now's the time to do it.
When we're talking about the on sale inspection, I know that that's geared towards rental properties. But what about I know one case in particular, and there's a number of things I know are going to come up as this ordinance is written. But an older gentleman, actually in this one particular case, he's 100 years old. He just left his house and moved into assisted living. Okay. The house is in really bad shape. Okay. The family doesn't want to put any money into this house. They just need to sell the house so that he has money to live in assisted living. So you can't really tell that family, well, you have to fix up all of these things and then sell the house. They need to sell the house so that he can continue to live for however many more years assisted living. And I think that that's just one example, I think, of things that will come up as we try to bring this ordinance together.
Another thing, and I know this might be just the current times, but we talked about giving grace of time for things to get done. Trying to hire a contractor, or
Yes.
even, I have ordered a door 3 months ago for my back door. It is still not here. I don't have control over that. And so there are a lot of people who, there are no electricians out there anymore. There are no new plumbers. There are no new people who can put on roofs and build those garages. So we're gonna have to really think about timeframes and being flexible with what our requirements are, because until we get those apprenticeships that are all in the, you know, the going pro thing through the state of Michigan, until those people start graduating, we're gonna be hurting for our skilled trades.
And I do need to go to public comment, but I will say to that effect, you know, at least, and Greg can intervene if not, but Greg and I have talked about that as well, and they are looking at that. They are giving, if people say, hey, I'm waiting for this contractor, I'm on a waiting list, this is where I'm at, they are being lenient with that, correct?
If you show us a contract, if you,
Oh, yeah,
you know, engage somebody
I
to do
paid
that work,
for it.
we're gonna give you the, you
Yeah.
know,
just don't have it yet.
work.
I know you have to go to public comment. I just want to say thank you so much. We've taken a lot of your time and we really appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Keith.
So at this time, we're going to go to public comment. If there is any public comment, please state your name and address.
I'm just saying, I'm Peter Ramos, homeowner at 420 South Lynn Street. I agree with everything Lynn and D'Angelo and Scott and Mark said. This is very important. This is an investment that's needed in our city. And it's incredibly difficult to find housing. I know I've been homeless for an extended period and now I'm a real one. So it's not too, but that's part of having a better city, a more funky city. And as mentioned, you'll get your return on investment and then some. I hope you all move forward with this, and I would also like to see a higher amount of money put towards it, but every bit counts.
Hearing no more public comment, are there any commissioner comments? Before we move to the regular meeting?
Make sure you
Yes, tell the
guys
kids.
grab a cookie.
Oh, I'll do that. I'll do that.
Okay.
All right, may I get a motion to adjourn?
So move. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, and we are heading out to our regular meeting, which will be a little delayed because we must have a bathroom break. I have microphone. I call to order the Adrian City Commission meeting for December 6th, 2021. We are sorry for the delay. Our pre-meeting ran a little over. If everyone would please rise for a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Mayor Heath,
Present.
Commissioner Halt,
Present.
Commissioner Roberts,
Present.
Commissioner Miller,
Present.
Commissioner Strayer,
Present.
Commissioner Castleberry,
Present.
Commissioner Gauss,
Present.
all commission members present.
May I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move we approve the consent agenda. Support.
I have a motion from Commissioner Halt with a second from Commissioner Gauss. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Halt,
Yes.
Commissioner Roberts,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
Commissioner Strayer,
Yes.
Commissioner Castleberry,
Yes.
Commissioner Gauss,
Yes.
Mayor Heath,
Yes.
consent agenda approved by an all yes vote.
Moving on to our ordinances. Ordinance 21-010 is a second reading and consideration of an ordinance to amend the City of Adrian zoning and development regulations, Article 5, Sections 5.0 to 5.2, and Article 25, Section 25.02, 25.05, 25.11, and 25.15 through 25.18 with regard to childcare facilities. May I get a motion to adopt the ordinance?
So moved.
Support.
Are there any public comments? Are there any commissioner comments? I have a motion from Commissioner Miller with a second from Commissioner Strayer. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Roberts,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
Commissioner Strayer,
Yes.
Commissioner Castleberry,
Yes.
Commissioner Gauss,
Yes.
Mayor Heath,
Yes.
Commissioner Hou.
Yes.
Ordinance adopted by unanimous vote.
Special Order -1 is a public hearing to hear and consider comments regarding the application of an obsolete property rehabilitation exemption certificate from Adrian City Center LLC, property owner of 115, 117, 119, and 121 South Main Street. I now call this public hearing to order. And to begin this, I'm going to ask Scott Gibson to please explain the project for which the Oprah is requested before taking the rest of the public comment.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Is the document? There we go. I can see the document now. So the overall focus of this project is to activate what was originally known as the Hammerman's building. The county records have it as around 30,000 square feet. It's been vacant for a number of years as people, if they're familiar with the building, they know that this has been a bit of it was a wonderful structure, still is in many ways, but it's in dire need of attention. And so I was engaged by some of the owners to come on board and put together an adaptive reuse plan that incorporated a number of different vehicles, if you will. So historic tax credits are being brought to bear. We've been working with MEDC to put together some MCRP monies. And then as we put together the model and analyzed the market, we realized, that this building needed to be actually increased in size. So right now the project is penciled out at almost 60,000 square feet. We are doing an addition onto the back of the building. When the project is complete, it will have around 24 brand new market rate apartments. It will also have around 15,000 square feet on the first floor, and we are going to be activating the basement as well, which is one of the reasons why the project is gaining so much square footage from what it's currently recorded at. The present budget for the building is around 12 million all in, with a construction budget for hard cost construction exceeding $10 million. As part of our work with MEDC, Paula Holtz is our representative that we've been working with for quite some time. We needed to incorporate an Oprah as part of this. We've had representatives from the city go through the property. They've recognized that the building is blighted and it is obsolete in almost every measurable way, including the fact that the back of the building is open to the air. There is no roof over the back of the building. So it's going to require substantial renovation. It will be taken back to a partially a historic standard. It is being governed by the requirements of the Department of Interior. So the State Historic Preservation Office is involved and has already approved this project and its plan. So it has an approved part 2, if you're familiar with that process. So right now we are looking to, get feedback on getting this Oprah approved, help educate the community and the stakeholders as to what we intend to do. And that's what I'm here today, is to answer any questions we can and help address any sort of maybe information gap that exists between what the project is doing and what people think about it.
Thank you. So at this time, we will take any public comment and during this public hearing. Commissioners are also welcome to ask any questions you want during this, since it is a public hearing. Hearing no comment, I call this public hearing closed. Moving on to our resolutions. Resolution R21-172 is from administration. It is a resolution to approve the application of an obsolete property rehabilitation exemption certificate from Adrian City Center LLC, property owner of 115, 117, 119, and 121 South Main Street. May I get a motion to adopt the resolution?
Move to adopt the resolution. Support.
Are there any public comments?
Joaquin Ramos, 422 South Winter Street, Homeowner. I just want to say, as someone who goes around downtown regularly, I walk there pretty much all times of day if I feel like it. I'm really excited to see this project. That's all.
Are there any commissioner comments? I have a motion from Commissioner Strayer with a second from Commissioner Gauss. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Miller. Commissioner Miller,
Accept.
Commissioner Strayer,
Yes.
Commissioner Castleberry.
Yes.
Commissioner Gauss,
Yes.
Mayor Heath,
Yes.
Commissioner Halt,
Yes.
Commissioner Roberts.
Yes.
Resolution adopted by unanimous vote.
Resolution R21-173 is from the police. It is a resolution to approve the expenditure of American Rescue Plan funds. Before I ask for this adoption, would you like to come please and explain, Chief Emmerich, on how you plan to use this expenditure?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Good evening. Vince Emmerich, Chief of Police for the City of Adrian. Back October 4th, I presented resolution R21-159, which passed, which enabled the expenditure of American Rescue Funds for this purpose, to sponsor 3 cadets through the academy, to get them trained and to replace personnel that we lost during the pandemic. What we didn't anticipate was the difficulty in finding personnel to fill those spots. We had people lined up, but the job market is very aggressive, and before too long, they found more lucrative offers and changed their mind with us. So we had 3 people lined up to go, and we were back down to 1, and we're trying to be more competitive by increasing our sponsorship rate. That's not something that's part of our contract. So for as long as I can remember, it's been $12 an hour, and that's never been a problem, because the actual sponsorship itself is such a huge investment in the person that was like it was like winning the lottery. You know, if this is what you wanted to do, that's a great situation to be in. But now other people are adopting the same model. Other agencies are taking that on as a means to attract candidates. So it's a little more competitive out there than when we first started. So we wanted to revisit that wage. And that is the reason for my second resolution, is to bump that up a little bit. In addition, if you had a chance to look at the memo, there's personnel that had left in senior positions, and now we have to train people to get into those, to fill those spots. And that training money can also be spent out of rescue funds. So I specifically a staff and command training that's just over 3,000, and some crash reconstruction training that's about 2,000 there. So we were hoping to use that rescue money to offset rather than pay that directly out of our training budget.
Thank you. May I get a motion to adopt the resolution?
So moved.
Support.
Are there any public comments? Are there any commissioner comments? I have a motion from Commissioner Roberts with a second from Commissioner Castleberry. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Strayer,
Yes.
Commissioner Castleberry,
Yes.
Commissioner Gauss,
Yes.
Mayor Heath,
Yes.
Commissioner Halt,
Yes.
Commissioner Roberts,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller.
Yes.
Resolution adopted by unanimous vote.
It is now time for public comment. Just to reiterate, there is a 3-minute time limit, which will be shown on the screen. And for the record, please state your name and address. I will begin with public comment in-house before moving on to Zoom. So we will open that up at this time.
Hello, I'm Joaquin Ramos, a homeowner of 422 South Winter Street. I'm sure you haven't heard this before, all new information. So I just want to welcome you all, and you'll be receiving email to this effect soon, that on Friday, we have Second Fridays at 301 South Tecumseh over by Parish Park. The same Second Fridays we usually put on, of course, we're in the cold months, so it's a little smaller, and it's indoors. I'm sure you appreciate the indoors part. So welcome you all there. We also have a meeting on Sunday if you want to come and talk to some of the residents on the historic east side. And we hope to see you there. Of course, again, you'll be receiving an email, and feel free to reach out to me. You've all met me at least once. Have a good day.
Kira Snyder, homeowner at 422 South Winter. Be a little silly being up here talking about Facebook, but I was flipping through Facebook and I saw a post in one of the community groups says, wanted to know who was giving out free marijuana edibles at the parade Friday. Well, a response on the thread, a lady said that they were only giving them to people over 21. I wasn't there. I don't know who was doing it, what was going on, and I fully support marijuana. Been using it a long time, but this is inappropriate. We wouldn't let them give out cigarettes or alcohol. Why were they giving out marijuana edibles? If it's a business, coupons maybe, so they have to go through the proper channels. I don't know, but I brought up problems with parades in the past, like the white supremacist rebel flag and the anti-LGBTQ plus rhetoric. I was told we can't control parades because whomever puts them on, but I don't understand that. We own the roads as a city. We own the barricades for rerouting traffic. We employ the officers that patrol the parades. Why can we not have some control over what happens there? You know, the city owns this stuff. By extension, the community does. This is not good for the community. So I'm hoping that maybe we can figure something out, control these community events a little better. Thank you.
At this time, I will open up public comment for those on Zoom. You will see your 3-minute time limit on the screen, and please state your name and address as well if you are participating via Zoom. Hearing no public comment, I will now do commissioner comments. Commissioner Roberts?
Even though I wasn't well last week, I did sneak to the back of the parade area. And I thought that both the parade and the tree lightings downtown with Comstock Park went very well. So kudos to the city staff who took care of all of that.
Hearing no more commissioner comments, we are now going to move on to the city administrator performance evaluation.
Mayor, I would request that the commission conduct my evaluation in closed session.
May I get a motion to move into closed session?
So moved. Second.
I have a motion from Commissioner Halt with a second from Commissioner Miller and Commissioner Gauss. Roll call, please. Do I don't need it for that?
That was just true.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry about that. Commissioner Miller and Commissioner Strayer, sorry, yes, that was. Oh,
Ellen, you made that motion, right?
yes,
Yeah.
but then Miller did a second along with Strayer. That's what, yes, sorry, that's what I was doing. Okay, so I have a motion from Commissioner Halt with a second from Commissioner Miller and Commissioner Strayer. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Castleberry.
Yes.
Commissioner Gauss,
Yes.
Mayor Heath,
Yes.
Commissioner Halt,
Yes.
Commissioner Roberts,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
Commissioner Strayer.
Yes.
Motion to go into closed session is approved by an all yes vote.
And we will not have any voting that will be taking place or anything within this closed session. There may be a statement when we come out, but that will be the extent of it from coming out of this evaluation. Thank you very much. Recording in progress. Yes. Can't I stand? All right. May I get a motion to adjourn?
So move. Support.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.